Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, a new series on the different periods of training and what they should look like. And after that, World of Running updates about some sad cheaters and crazy high schoolers. Welcome back. Glad to be speaking into your eardrums once more. Well, I guess depending on what kind of audio thing you're using, we might be speaking into different places in your anatomy. Like if you have, those ones that like press against your head, we're not speaking into your eardrums with those then. We're speaking into that bone. What's that bone called? That it vibrates and... Do you know what I'm talking about? Andy's looking at me like I'm crazy right now.
No,
this is
I know
a real
there's
thing
like
I'm
some.
talking
I know
about.
what you're talking about. The open ones, right? I think I have a pair of those.
I don't know what that means, but yeah.
Like aftershocks.
Well, anyway, not to endorse any specific brands of headphones because that's not what we're here for right now. But what we are here for is to bring content to you that is pertinent and relevant. And we are beginning a series today. We'll tell you more about it in a little bit, but it's going to be wonderful. You're going to find it to be very practical. But as these things do, it's going to raise the need for precise questions about your own situation. And you can ask those because we'll answer them on air at the end of the month. And so if you want to get in some questions to be addressed on the podcast, just go to AtoZrunning.com/question, share your thoughts, and we'll feature a response end of the month every month.
Yes, we will. And a few of you have asked me what the rolling thing that I use is.
Which
the
rolling
orb
thing? You use lots of rolling
extreme
things.
This orb. It's a small ball.
That one.
And I am a brand ambassador for them, so I do endorse this product. I reached out to them because I use it on the regular. But the reason that I like this, because we had talked about that myofascial release and how important that can be for regular use and getting that bound fascia broken up so that our bodies can move correctly, that kinetic flow can be there. But I like consistency for that. And so I travel a lot and many people are on the go. And I think having like a small ball like this is more practical than keeping a huge roller in your car or packing that on a trip. I don't really fly with a big foam roller. So this small ball, it's called the Orb from Pro Tech Athletics, is something that I bring along with me. So this is it, guys. This is what I use. There's other products that they have too. There's bigger and smaller balls and other kinds of tools, but this tends to be my go-to. And you can get a discount on it with the code AtoZ20. That's ATOZ20. That's Pro Tech Athletics.
They have a new product that is used for the scraping technique. Many of you are familiar with
we talked about that.
Stuff like that. And so we've talked about it quite a bit. We talked about it on the recovery series, certainly, and with many of you directly, personally or individually. And now ProTech has an option. So most of the time, if you look on the tools that fulfill that kind of niche, they tend to be really expensive, costly things like hundreds of dollars, or at least close to $100. And ProTech has one now that is much more affordable. So if you're looking for a good Graston tool, we haven't tried it yet ourselves. We will at some point, and we'll let you know whether it's up to snuff. But worth a try, and not a terrible commit.
Well, you get 20% off with the A to Z 20.
Get your 20% off. Get the Flex Edge and give it a shot. See how it goes.
And you can let us know what you think too, as well.
Yeah, because if it's rubbish, tell us so that we will tell people that it's rubbish. All right, now, speaking of things we want to tell you, we are going to be at Rivertown Races. We've been talking this up for a while now, and it's coming soon. So if you're in West Michigan area on April 22, you got to be there. Now, we're going to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit. We're going to be doing some things there. We've got a tent. You're going to be able to find us very easily at the race location, and we're going to be giving away some stuff. We're going to be doing some things with content. It's going to be loads of awesomeness, and only possible if you are there. So come to Rivertown Races, and if you haven't registered yet, you can get still 10% off. You don't have much time left to do that, but if you go to rivertownraces.com and use code AtoZ10, you can get your 10% off. You can register and see us there so that you can enter to win some of the sweet giveaways as well.
Yeah, that will be a lot of fun.
So now, as we were mentioning, we've got a series ahead of us right now, ahead of you, for new content that we're going to be releasing in the coming weeks to try to unpack training periods. And so with that, we want to get into the first in the series, probably one of the most relevant for all of us. So let's get on to our main topic.
As Zach and I were discussing topics that we thought would be helpful to all of you, we decided that we should go through the training periods.
Because this is something that people have been constantly asking about.
Right.
Lots and lots of questions that we don't always have a chance to get to on our Q&A end of month.
Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of our listeners are people who really like to understand the training, which is why you listen to this podcast, but also a lot of coaches. And so this is kind of like the deep dive / overview of the more important parts of each of these training periods and why we do them. Would you agree?
So you've heard us talk a while back. In fact, the last time we did it at length, we interviewed Jed Christensen, a coach who lives out in Pennsylvania, and he was talking about training periodization and where that fundamentally kind of grew in terms of like running ubiquity. Is that a word? Ubiquity. And so we were able to kind of do a cursory overview of everything there. But what we find now is that we're answering lots of questions about what should things look like in a given period of training. And if there's really one question more than anything else, it's like, how do I know I'm getting what I need to get from it? And like, when is it time to move on to the next period?
Mm-hmm. And I think that helping us be consistent and be patient and be able to achieve our goals has a lot to do with how we understand the pieces of the puzzle. And I think a lot of runners, myself included, will often try to rush things, or we feel a little greedy in the speed department. And we will do things early on in our training that aren't really going to help us much later on. And so I think it's really helpful to be able to dial in the purposes of each of the training periods, the purposes of these runs, so that we can feel satisfied and we can feel confident in our training. So there's a standard approach.
Yeah, what we're going to do in the coming weeks, there will be several of these to really dive deep into each of the training periods. And so we're going to talk about what that period is and why you have that in training in general. And then how you know that you've actually accomplished the goal of that training period, like you're ready to move on to the next one. And then how to actually do that well. So how do you know that you've accomplished it, and then what do you actually do to make that happen? Mm-hmm. So that we're going to do that with each of these training periods. And I think it's going to be, well, both super practical, but also valuable to understand. Periodization is not the only way to train. And so if you download a Hal Higdon training plan right now, I'll throw that out there because many of you probably do. You may be training off of one right now, or you may have in the past, but either way, Hal Higdon does not do periodization in most of the training plans, especially the generic ones. And part of that, there's a rationale behind that. One of the thoughts behind not periodizing is that you tend to feel fresher throughout the entire time you're training. The whole time you feel fresher on average. If you were to like just take your feeling and average it across an entire training season, you feel fresher the whole time if you're not periodizing, because you're doing just kind of a blend of everything all the time. It also means that you probably are better able to race at any given moment during the training, except for that you're not any better able to race at the end as you were in the middle or like the final third or something like that. So periodization, what it's going to do is it's going to prime you better for your goal race than any other kind of approach. But you sacrifice that general sense of like, I could race at any moment and feel good. Doesn't mean you're going to race well, you're just going to feel ready to do it more often. So we'll get into that a little bit. But there are many other kinds of combinations of these things. And you'll see a lot of great coaches out there with great success who are not doing periodization or not doing it in a typical way, and who are. And the problem with all of these things as far as training goes is someone will say, I just ran a PR, and so everything that I was doing and the way I was doing it, I now must do always all the time because it made me PR. And training is not able to be simplified like that. That's just not the way it works. There are too many other factors going on. And so when you have a single approach kind of dynamic, which most coaches do, this is the approach we tend to take in general. We are that way, like any other coaches. When you do that, you're basically operating under the assumption that even if you do the same thing over and over, you're going to continue to be able to improve. And part of the goal as a coach is to be able to look at that and say the general approach might be the same over and over, but the actual specific nuances and implementation should change depending on the situation and the need. And so that's where no coach is like doing the same thing literally with this one athlete all the time, no matter what. I guess there are some out there who might be, but that's kind of lazy. And so if you're following like a generic training plan that you download off of something or read in a book, that may be what you're doing. And that's kind of a lesser approach versus, within any of the umbrellas you take. So anyway, periodization is the idea that you use different phases of training, we call them periods, to accomplish certain ends. And once they are accomplished, they kind of prime you for the next step. And end result in all of those steps is you are so well primed for the race at the end that you are much more capable of high-level performance relative to your own potential by doing a periodized approach versus a more general one.
I'm going to put it in a very simple way. Periodization helps you build your peak. It's a higher peak.
Higher peaks and or lower valleys as well. By design, that's intentional. And when you look at, and I guess, well, let me say this. The reason why we fall in the camp, if you will, of periodization more than any other kind of training approach is because physiology supports this approach more than any other approach. So it is better in terms of how our bodies adapt to have peaks and valleys. This is why we don't run the same thing every day. That's a microcosm. It's also why we'll do things like take a week or two off after a training season. To have a deliberate valley is important because it helps us adapt as physiological creatures. Mm-hmm. And so in training, it makes sense to utilize that, and we find that the results are invariably better over larger quantities of data, mm-hmm. at least in our experience.
So you probably loved, at least I loved, the title that Zach had, which was How to Build the Best Base. Because I think a lot of people know the term base and are kind of unsure what to do with it or what it exactly means. So today we're going to be talking about building.
Building, period. So some call it the base, period. I should say this. The word that we use to describe our periods with our athletes is in fact the word that associates with the action you're trying to accomplish. So we don't say base for this training phase because base is the outcome. You're building the base. So you could use the outcome. That's fine. It's no harm, no foul. I'm just saying the reason we chose the words we chose is because they're the action. It's the thing you're doing during that phase. So you're building during your base phase. And what does that mean? And why do we have that as a phase? So what you're building specifically is your musculoskeletal strength, your resilience, your structural resilience. And so like literally your skeleton and your skeletal muscles and things like that, right? So naturally you need those things to be resilient so you don't get hurt, you don't break. But also we find that training adaptations occur better when we are stronger. So meaning we can actually receive a higher benefit for a given bout of work when we have a stronger baseline of musculoskeletal strength. And so that's it. That's the building phase. And we do that because when you establish a good, firm foundation, everything else you're going to do is going to be better. So of course, naturally, you would want to do that. It makes a lot of sense to us.
Except some of us don't want to do it because it doesn't feel immediately rewarding.
Oh, it's not. This is the hardest part.
Yeah.
The building phase, the building period is not immediately rewarding. As a matter of fact, a lot of people get frustrated. Well, sometimes even to the point where they wonder if they're doing something that's bad because they actually might get slower during the building period, which is almost always the case. In fact, if you were to like do a performance test at the end of a building period, you're probably going to be slower than you were when you started. Why is that? Well, it's because we'll get into the details of what we're actually doing in the building, but it's because by design, you are doing something training-wise that is not going to enhance your performance potential in that period, which is why no one should ever try to race when they're in a building period. Well, no, actually, that's not why. I don't care if you race in a building period as far as like performance, because I don't really care how you perform when you're in a building period. But what I do care about is racing in a building period is bad because it's risky. If you haven't built enough of a foundation, it's easier to hurt yourself, certainly. But also, it actually harms the adaptations you're achieving during the building because it's going to increase the need for some recovery time. It's going to decrease the value of the runs you're going to do in the near future after a hard effort. So there's lots to be said about when you should race and not, and we'll talk about that in each of these situations. The building is like, don't race. We're getting ahead of ourselves though. So let's get into a little bit about how you know that you have built enough of a foundation, because I think this is the trick. What's going to set apart when we talk about these periods in this series, what's going to really set this apart is understanding that a training period serves a purpose. We just articulated that. In the base, in the building, it's the musculoskeletal resilience, right? So that's the purpose of it. So knowing that it serves a purpose, it also means that there's actually like a time when that purpose has been fulfilled. And what we find is that most runners, as a matter of fact, nearly every runner who is not being coached directly to not do this is almost always moving from one period to another if they're training in a periodized sense, because that's when the schedule says to change to the next one, right? Most of us do that. As a matter of fact, many of our runners do that simply because we're not trying to attend to the reality of what it looks like to have achieved the purpose of this time. So we want to make this abundantly clear because this is probably the most important part of all of it. There's a time when your body is ready to stop building and start the next thing, which we'll reveal later what the next thing is. You can probably guess. But so there's a time, literally, when you are not ready and you shouldn't stop but continue building. And there's a time when it's clear you are ready. And if you were to continue doing building work, you're not really going to be building much more anymore. Like if you've kind of built as much as you can within that approach in that period. Okay? So here's how it goes. For building, the most important thing you're doing is you're growing your tolerance for volume. Because remember, we're talking about skeleton and skeletal muscles. So we're not really working on the connective tissues as much during the building period. We really just want to get your structure strong. And so in doing that, the volume is the key. You want to build up that volume essentially as high as you can reasonably tolerate within your life constraints.
And I realize a lot of you guys have like little warning bells going on because you've heard that volume is what makes you injured.
Myth. Volume
Well,
does
I mean,
not.
if
But
you're-
when they look at the studies heavily, volume by itself is almost always not the thing that's the greatest cause of injury.
Usually it is intensity. And oftentimes it is so hard. It's so hard. And I know I'm speaking to the choir probably here, but it's so hard when you're in this building phase not to run what you think is your normal easy pace or just a little bit slower than that. Sometimes you really got to slow it down. And
All
so
the time.
yeah,
All the time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it can be harder than on some days than others, and that's usually when the injuries occur. It's by doing this volume with too much intensity.
Yeah. That's exactly when the injuries occur in almost every situation for runners. So what you're looking at here then is that the volume is the key, but we're not going to sit here and say everyone should run 100 miles a week. That's what the old Lydia
I've never done it.
Nobody runs 100 miles a week. Well, some people do, but you're not. That's not the goal for most runners, and it doesn't have to be. There's no optimal perfect thing. As many have thrown out 600 minutes in a week is kind of like the sweet spot. But again, that's only if you're running 7 days a week. If you're running fewer than 7 days a week, which most of us are running fewer than 7 days a week, you shouldn't be trying to run 600 minutes. That's a lot to do in under 7 days a week.
I think Sarah Hall does, though.
I'm sure she does, but she also runs like 120 miles. So
yeah.
Now, the key here is you look at what is available to you and how much is the, I can handle this much, and you try to kind of put a clear parameter around it. So if you can't run more than an hour every day, and maybe you can get an hour and a half on a long run on the weekend or something, that's it. That's your constraint. That's your maximum capacity. And so if you can run more than that, then you have a higher maximum capacity. And that's all there is to it. You have to figure out what can I handle? What's my life constraint? And I'm going to really just try to max that out over the course of this building period. This is the key, at the slowest possible comfortable effort. Slowest possible, easiest possible exertion that is not unnatural. So you want to be out there running and shuffling your feet into the ground.
I do have to ask a question, because a lot of people are going to be thinking this question. What if I did a full season, I only took a week off, and I'm starting up again? Do I need a full base building?
I mean, jog for a week, and if you feel great and you're jogging at your maximum capacity of volume, then you're ready to move on to the next thing. I mean, you do a week either way. No matter what, I would say always start with a week of jogging before you do anything else, just to give yourself the chance to see how everything's feeling, especially when you're coming off a break or you're resetting a new season. But no, you don't have to do. Okay, so I'll give the personal example. When at this moment in time, what I'm trying to do is, after a marathon season, if the marathon didn't totally knock me out, usually it takes me 2 weeks to get ready to run again after a marathon, no matter how hard I run.
Unless he's feeling really melancholy, then it takes longer.
If I'm sad, then it takes me 8 weeks. I don't know. But so most of the time right now, I can get past a marathon in 2 weeks and I'm feeling normal again running wise. And so those 2 weeks include jogging. I'm doing a lot of every other day jogging, short little bits and stuff. After that, I'm feeling like I'm pretty normal again. I'll start very soon into something that's not building. I'm not going to give away the secrets here yet, but so that won't take long, and it'll happen very quickly. That's okay because of what I'm doing in that instance. And then I'm doing a kind of an abbreviated season of 5 weeks for something. But if I'm trying to get started for a new big season of training, I've finished those 2 weeks of in between after that marathon. I'm going to start with a week of jogging again every single time, because I'm getting started for a new season of training, like a full season of training. That week of jogging helps me know where I'm at and what I'm ready for. And what almost every runner realizes is one of two things in that moment. They realize that jogging easy for a whole week felt like I was barely doing anything. I'm not stimulating my system at all. I'm running in 2 hours or more for a long run. I'm doing 60 to 90
normal,
minutes.
though. No.
And I get done and I'm like, wow, I just felt like I did nothing.
Oh my
this
word.
whole week. Okay, so
that's kind of obnoxious, isn't it, guys?
no, I'm saying if that happens, I'm saying one of two things here. If that happens, then you don't need to do any more building. That's obviously. Mm-hmm. But most of us, that's not the case. And so that's my point here.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's very uncommon. So most of the time what happens is you get done with a week and you think, that was pretty tough. I was a lot more fatigued than I thought I would be. I was a little bit sore after that long run, and I wasn't sure I would be. So do it again.
Yep.
Until you feel, this is the key. How do you know that your base is solid, right? Until you feel like you can handle that full max capacity of training in a week, and it's not fatiguing you in any kind of substantial way. Like you're a little bit tired after a longer run, sure. But you shouldn't be sore, certainly not for more than like a few hours or something. And you shouldn't feel like the next day you need more time to recover still from any run. So that's how you know you're ready to move on from building when you can handle your maximum capacity of volume at a minimal, easy effort, and it feels like it's just a reasonable amount of exertion that week.
And I'll take the other extreme case on the other end where you're coming back from a long period of time where you haven't been able to run. I had bilateral hip labrum repair, and that was staggered. So it ended up being many months, half a year, actually a little more than half a year of no running. So I had to do the building phase for months. And I had to be okay with that and keep looking at the week on week. And I was starting from a very minimal point. And many of you have the same kind of experiences that you've either had or you're going through right now. And having the patience is key during this time. And I had a friend of mine who also is going through a similar situation, and they were asking me about like, okay, well, I've been doing this for months. Can I do something else besides this? And you could put a few strides in there, but we're not testing the system. This is more, that would be for efficiency, to make sure you're more efficient. If you're doing it for months on end, but in general, like you're not wanting to move on to the next phase until you are ready to go. And for me, it took months. I wish I had it right here how many months it took me so that I could just tell you all, but do you remember?
Nope.
Yeah, it took at least a few months. So,
and it should be noted that for just the normal situation, building can take a month or two. That's actually very common. 4 to 8 weeks is kind of the standard range if you're starting from zero, like a break after a season or an injury or something. If you're not starting from zero, it might only take 2 weeks, a week, 3 weeks. That's pretty common. So variable there, and don't put a number like I have to be done with this building in 4 weeks. Now here's the challenge, right? Most of us have a goal race on a certain date, and we decide to start training a certain number of weeks before that, right? It's like in my head, like this is when I'm going to start training for it. Now you got to walk backwards from there and say, okay, if start training means you're going to like start to focus on it, but you've been training and it's you're not coming from like zero, you probably don't need much time or any. You might need 1 week of jogging to get that volume up a little bit more, make sure that you're feeling settled on it, and then you're just ready to go. So that's fine. But if you're starting from zero, don't tell yourself, I need 16 weeks to get ready for this marathon so I can take the next 3 months off because I don't have, I got a busy life and 16 weeks is all it's going to take, so I'm fine. 16 weeks is not enough time if you're also building appropriately before you start.
How many does Lydiard say if you're from zero, like 23 or something? I can't remember what it is.
I don't know because his schedules have a number of different variables that are going to change that. But the point being, building period is the like getting you ready to start training. Okay, so this doesn't count as like you're training for a goal. This is just setting. Yeah, but this isn't. But that's not what I mean though. This is setting. I am going to discredit it. This is not race preparation training. All this is foundational work, foundational building,
which is essential. So I liken it to like a canvas. Right now, you're stretching the canvas, you're building the frame. You cannot have a glorious piece of art without
like
this
painting?
Canvas.
Is that what you mean by canvas?
Yes, like a canvas that you have to pull over a frame. I feel like the base is what allows for you to even begin to have the imagination to complete your project.
Or you could liken it to the years of schooling and practice that you do so that you actually have art skills. And then you can even begin to think about painting something with a modicum of high quality, right? I don't know. I'm just being contentious on purpose. See if I can rile Andy. But so the idea here is there's a definite like, now that you've established, you've built, you are ready for now kind of like race training preparation type of stuff. And there's more nuance even than that on the next one, but that's not a topic for today. So let's talk about how to do this then, because we've alluded to it a little bit, but the key here is twofold. How much is enough volume? And so we mentioned, you have to just kind of establish your own constraints. But you also don't want to try to run 3 hours a day every day of the week because that's too much. And so there's a reasonable, and I would put it at this. However many days you run, doesn't matter because we can just use a rule of averages. It would be great if everyone out there had like unlimited time and resources to try to see if you can average 90 minutes a day for your running across the entire week.
So if you're doing 4 days.
If you're doing 4 days, it's still 90 minutes a day. If you're doing 7 days, it's still 90 minutes a day. Because that seems to be a kind of load that most people can safely handle. So again, I'm just saying that that's a nice kind of benchmark if everything else is
perfect in life. And
yeah, if it's just reasonable. Now, that doesn't mean you're running 90 minutes every day. That just means that's your average across the entire week. And then you break it down in terms of greater and lesser, higher and lower. So for the building phase, you want to have at least one run that's 2 hours or more if you can. And if you can't, whatever your maximum possible, great, that's fine. But you have one run that's longer. 2 hours or more is the common benchmark we use.
That you get to as you're building.
Exactly.
Not the first time you go out for building.
I'm talking about, yes, yep. So 2 hours, I'll get there. And then one or two other runs during the week, depends on how many days you're running. One or two other runs is 90 minutes-ish, maybe a little more if you want to. So this is how you get to your average of 90 minutes, because then your other runs are maybe 30 to 60 minutes, like short, and still just easy jogging. So if you run 4 days a week, then you're going to do a long run of 2 hours or more, a 90-minute run, and two 30 to 60-minute runs, if that makes sense. That's kind of like a common formula. If you're doing 6 days a week, you're going to do two 90-minute runs and two 30 to 60-minute runs. No, how many days did I just say? Three 30 to 60-minute runs. I didn't write it down. So in any event, you get the point. You're trying to average about 90 minutes or so. And in doing this, what you're accomplishing is as much easy running as you can and that given week comfortably. So every week you take as much volume as you reasonably can. So if I'm starting from 0, I start with a little bit. I'm not trying to run 2 hours yet. And how do I know if it's the right amount? Is as you get through things, you don't want these runs to leave you sore for more than a day at most. If you're sore for like 2 or 3 days on these runs, then back it down a touch. That's a little too much. And you don't want these runs to leave you so exhausted that you can't do it again a day or two later, right? So that's kind of your barometer. And then from there, you say, okay, at the end of the week, did I handle that reasonably? Like it didn't leave me sore and I wasn't exhausted for days on end. And if that's true, I'm ready to nudge it up a little bit. If that's not true, some days okay, but other days not so much, then let's do it again the next week. Don't increase anything and see if you can't handle it a little better. And what's going to happen is however many weeks it takes until you get to that maximum average goal that we were just talking about, however many days it takes to get to that is however many weeks you need for building. So then that tells you, now I've got to this maximum. I'm running easy for all these days. I'm handling it fine. That's how I build this nice musculoskeletal foundation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you think about it, a lot of times plans will have you running, like building as you're growing your intensity, like drastically. Mm-hmm. And that recipe is very dangerous.
Yeah.
There'll be times there'll be times where you might have a little bit of an incremental bump, just a very small one when you're growing your it will be a higher volume, like in miles, because you're running faster, if that makes sense. It would be the same amount of time, but perhaps more miles. But all that to say, you want to be able to do this without the strain. If you can't do it without the strain, then adding it in can be very detrimental to our training.
Yeah, well, and keep in mind then what you're doing here is you're not working your whole entire system yet. You're working the most fundamental level of what your body needs to run and to be able to train. And what is that? You need a strong structure. Like every time you hit the ground, you need to not break. And so you also need to be able to hit the ground and bounce back off of it with reasonable ease, because you're doing that a lot in these training runs. So that in principle, the idea of building as its own training period is one of these that's just kind of lost in translation. Most of here's what they do. Here's what they assume. Most of the training plan generic out there, they assume two things. One, if you select the beginner one, they assume you're not really doing much running before they start with you. But they also don't give you enough time to build up a good foundation. And so they just pretend like it's possible to build a foundation while you're just doing normal training workouts so you do the normal kind of like, I'm going to do a one type of interval day that's a little bit faster, one type of like threshold type day, and a longer run, and then maybe some other stuff in between. And they just assume that you can also build up your foundation while you're doing that, but you just simply can't effectively. It's highly ineffective for both things, for building a foundation and for growing things like your aerobic condition and muscle recruitment.
It also gives fast rewards, which a lot of people like to see.
Oh yeah, you can see results quite quickly, what feel like results.
Well, they are.
Sure.
You would get a little faster because you're stimulating your neuromuscular system more, and it would be faster.
Yeah,
but your
keep in
height,
mind,
your peak, like we were speaking of earlier, your peak won't be as high.
if you can even stay healthy through the entire thing.
True.
So, and here's the magic of this all, right? Most people stay healthy through those types of training simply by the virtue of they don't push themselves too hard. They're like they have some kind of internal governor that's stopping them from pushing themselves too hard. For those of us, and there are many of you because you're a runner and you're listening to this, who don't have a good internal governor because you're willing to dig deep and really drive at your goals, you hurt yourself far too easily because you're just simply not building the proper pieces in the proper order.
Wow,
So,
I feel like seen right there. Like I used to do that for sure.
yeah.
Overrun, over exert myself.
Well, all of us do. And there's two ways we do it. One is we aren't yet able to handle a thing, and so we are stretching and straining to try to build things up when we're not ready for that thing yet. And then on the other side of it is we're getting into prime shape and condition, and we start to feel invincible. Like, wow, it's just like I'm able to do things that are really exciting and faster than I thought. And I'm just going to really, drive for a little extra. Get that. Maybe I'll run a PR in this workout. Maybe I'll, all that kind of stuff. And then you hurt yourself. So that's what I tend to do is as soon as I start feeling like I'm in good shape, then I start overreaching. Whatever the case may be, it has to start with building. That's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you know everything about what it takes to build, remember the one most essential thing. You can use something like a generic structure training plan to kind of cue off of like, how much should I increase? When should I increase? When should I be done building and such? You can use that as a point of reference, but the key is you need to make sure your body is ready for that next step up or for the next training period once you've completed it. And that's where your coach comes in. Because if you have one and they happen to be involved with AtoZrunning, then chances are these things are great conversations to be having with your coach. Like, here's how I'm feeling this week. Here's how everything went. What do you think? And your coach may be able to advise you further on what's the best thing to do for the next week. Now, that's not necessarily suggesting that we're trying to coerce or strong arm everyone into our coaching services by this series of episodes. That is by no means our goal.
You just want to equip you with the knowledge in order to help yourself get the most from your training. And we believe that it's having patience in this building phase sometimes, that's something that's often missed because it is not the sexy part of training. It's not the part that's going to make you feel like you're super fast. So this is a very, very important element of training, and I do think that people move on from it rather quickly, especially if they have high aspirations or big goals that are coming up in a certain condensed time frame.
I really want to riff on that word and how it's so misused. in our
Okay,
contemporary vernacular, but I'm not going to. Instead, what I'm going to do is simply encourage that principled approach to these kinds of things. What does my body need? What's the best way to get it? And if I can do that well and diligently, I am going to be better for it. And so if you take into heart everything we have now said about building, then you are going to be so ready for next week's episode.
Yes, you are.
When we talk about conditioning.
Conditioning.
Which is the bread and butter. Every training approach under the sun is going to agree that this is the thing that makes runners great. Mm-hmm. And so stay tuned next time for that. But this time, before we're done, we've got some really interesting things to share with you from the world of running. Couple A to Z runner updates to get you started. First, Jax, congrats on the big marathon. Jax ran a marathon PR by over 5 minutes, as well as a first-time Boston qualification. Hey! Nice work, Jax. Very solid. Hannah also ran a 5K, just kind of testing the waters a little bit as she's gearing up for her racing season. And a strong effort. Nice work, Hannah.
Nice job. Well, now on to some sad news. After giving you that great A to Z runner news, there was a busted champion. Yet another one.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
it's going to keep happening.
It does change history because titles get stripped away.
Is she getting stripped of the title here?
Well, she very well could. Like, it is in the conversation.
Okay. It hasn't happened yet, though. Yeah.
Steeplechase world champ Nora Gerudo was suspended for a biological passport violation. Now, I had to look up what that is. I don't know if any of you know what it is, but I figured that some of you probably don't, since I didn't know. But
I mean, she had some kind of robot parts installed in her.
This is what a biological passport is. The fundamental principle of the athlete biological passport is to monitor selected biological variables over time that indirectly reveal the effects of doping, rather than attempting to detect the doping substance or method even itself. Yes. So they can see like some abnormal markers.
Yes. I mean, if you take in certain things, it causes other things inside you to change, right? That's kind of the principle of whatever the thing is you're taking. Mm-hmm. So they don't have to know that you took that thing to see the results of it. There is a ton of skepticism around the biological passport approach.
Oh, really?
By the way, yes.
Okay.
Because keep in mind, other things can influence those levels also.
Well, that's why it's over time.
Yes.
Because you can see like huge changes.
That's also why something like this is not handled the same way as like if they detect that you've got steroids in your system. There's immediate
more concrete.
And easy
but I think
action.
This is supposed to help avoid any kind of new methods that they don't know how to test for yet. I think that's probably part of the reason. They can look at these biological markers and they're like, this is not normal biological function.
So the key here is they know your history of, that's what the biological passport concept is. So your history over time of these levels, and then suddenly it starts changing in an unnatural or synthetic way. And they say, no, that doesn't happen normally. And that wouldn't happen to you normally because we know what the last 10 years of your life have looked like.
So Gerudo was the world champion, as I mentioned, in the 3,000 meter steeplechase. And her win was the number 3 all-time steeplechase time of 8:53.02, which is huge.
Very, very fast.
Emma Coburn posted after this information was like, she's like, yeah, if times drop and it looks too good to be true, it likely is.
Usually is.
Because in her prelim, she ran a 9:01. I don't know if you guys remember that. And she like came through the line and her arms were in the air. And I thought in our commentary afterwards, I was like, I wonder if she thought that was the final because of how she ran the race.
We
and
did,
everything.
in fact, think that there was something a little weird about that.
Yeah,
prelim.
but she ran a 9:01, and then obviously that wasn't her best because then she went on to run 8:53. But anyway, that's a crazy fast time to run in a prelim period, and it was just so much better than she had done before. So anyway, there was some skepticism. Emma Coburn, our U.S. One of our great U.S. steeplechasers, had some skepticism there too. So anyway, in 2020, 2022, the AIU told her agent that hematosic and hemoglobin levels, I'm so sorry, guys, I am not a medical person, but essentially her blood levels were abnormal and it could only have been achieved by blood doping or EPO use, and was asked to provide an explanation, which she then went on to say something like having an ulcer to her agent. And then there was another thing that she said later on when she was pressed about like a different place that she was training, like an altitude thing.
She got on WebMD and started Googling what can affect hematocrit and hemoglobin levels.
Yeah. And then her agent said that when AIU reached out in 2022, she was also asked to explain variations in her athlete biological passport from 2020, and so he was wondering why they were waiting so long to confront her on this, because apparently she had abnormal variations from 2022 or sorry 2020 as well.
Yeah, when your agent says, why didn't you bust her the last time you caught her? Well, all right.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Sad news. And this is just a little bit more on the cheating side of things. And we don't love to have to share with you about these things, but I do think because it affects our sport and the history of our sport, it's important to discuss.
And this one's super interesting.
This one is weird. And I'm really not sure if maybe they just totally had a brain fart and this is intentional
totally on
cheating.
Purpose.
Okay.
They probably thought it was funny.
Well, I don't know if they think it's funny anymore since they're having a ban. But Camilo Santiago of Spain and Ivan Zarco Alvarez of Honduras have been suspended for 6 months by the Athletics Integrity Unit for bib swapping at the Dresden Marathon in 2021. So this is a little bit old. But when Zarco was unable to run because of plantar fasciitis, he suggested to Santiago that he should take his bib, which had his identification number printed on it. And the Spaniard, Santiago, went on to run 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 36 seconds, which was the Honduran record.
And he was wearing a Honduran's bib.
Yes.
So the other guy got credit for the race result.
So the reason why they suspect that this is likely on purpose, because they would have known the Honduran record. Like Ivan
Maybe, yeah. I would expect so.
Alvarez would have known that because he's a great runner himself. So,
yeah, it should be noted that Santiago is like a sub 210 marathoner.
Yeah, he's run
so
209.56.
Runs 217 and kind of a pedestrian effort.
That would have been really I mean, that obviously would have been well under the record if he would have run even close to his personal best. So
very interesting.
It's just really weird. I don't know.
So this article contains no information about motive. No idea why they were doing that.
Like,
or
why
what they were thinking.
did Ivan Zarco Alvarez give Santiago money? Be like, hey, I want this record. Will you wear my bib? Make me look.
Who knows?
Okay. Do you have any good bib stories? I'll have a really quick good bib story. So it's so embarrassing. I felt really embarrassed about this. So I was running the Cherry Festival.
Andy's a bib thief. She
No,
steals people's bibs
not
and then
that's not what
can't
happened.
stop herself.
This is my story, not yours, to fabricate. I was running the Cherry Festival 10K. Okay. I think it was the 10K anyway. And that's in Traverse City, Michigan in the summertime, July. Beautiful, wonderful. I was there for fun, but I happened to think that I won the women's race. I thought I did. People told me I did. So I was at the table where they had the awards, and I come up there and I was like, hey, I think I won the race. And then there's other people around, and they're like, no, you didn't. And I'm horrified. I'm like, this is so awkward. I just thought that I won this race, and they're telling me in front of all these people, no, you didn't win. Well, it ended up that I did win. There was a
man,
a college kid, a college boy,
who was a girl's bib.
Yeah, so this college guy ran with this girl's bib and won the women's race. Which then that makes me think too, maybe it's just a brain fart.
Nah.
He didn't realize he was gonna win the women's race. It's gonna be obvious he took his friend's bib.
Nah, he did it on purpose.
Anyway,
it was funny.
But then
it was funny.
Then they told me, they're like, you can come to our office and pick up your award
a
well,
week later.
I live like
3 hours
away, so I'm like, no, that's okay. And now I'm just forever sheepish about that victory. But
When you have to claim
anyway.
your own victory to the race people.
Like, I think I did, though. Are you sure? Like, people told me I won. No, you didn't win. Okay.
Well, anyway, this is perhaps a great thing for you to post in some comments about your funny bib stories or incorrect bibs, or
yeah.
if you're any of you out
I'd be
there
fascinated.
cheaters trying to swap bibs to win
Don't
some
do
money,
it.
tell us about it. It's time for a public confession. All right. Our last one here now, to end on a positive note, and an incredibly positive note, is all the excitement around the high school 3200 like flagship event, the Arcadia 3200 meter run. And so, the high schoolers run all these random distances. So 3200 meters, which is like 18 meters short of 2 miles. But
Yeah, why?
because it's
meters. Okay.
No, because it's high school.
Okay.
You'll never run that distance again after you graduate high school. All right. So it's funny, though. This event is like where all the fast people go to run track in this distance. And this is like, historic. The people who win this are legendary names and all the stuff, right? So this year is just
insane.
I don't even know how to describe it, except that you listen to these numbers. All right, so in the girls' race, first, Irene Riggs, which is a name you should know by now. We've been talking about her a little bit this year. She's just dominating everything and doing it in dominating fashion. And so she wins the girls' race in 2.5 seconds short of a national record, which, by the way, was 2 seconds slower than her own personal best. She actually missed the national record already this year by like hundredths or something.
Oh, my word.
So, yeah, super close.
Wow.
But she went out with the intent of smashing the national record. She was on pace to run 10 seconds under the national record.
Really?
At halfway. Didn't really hold on. But she still won the race, and she still ran a very fast time. The fastest time ever in Arcadia, in fact, to meet record.
That's crazy.
Yes.
Well,
what are you going to say?
I was just going to say 4:48 through 1,600
Yes.
meters.
Yeah, she went through the mile at about 4:50.
Oh, that's nasty.
Yes, it is.
That's
and
so
then proceeded
fast.
to run a lot slower than that for the second
But
one.
not so much that she didn't run
she still won the
9:52 and win.
in a meeting record time. So here's the deal. 31 girls had run under 10 minutes ever in the 3,200 meters in the United States. Ever in the history of when they've been doing this. 31. 9 girls did it in this one race alone, bringing that number up to 38.
Yeah, girls.
Or 39, actually, because Irene had already done it before this race. So 8 girls ran under 10 for the first time.
Wow.
When there had only been 31 prior to that.
I mean,
which is
that's really
crazy.
exciting. And I do
So
think
exciting.
that, like, women's running has been just in the U.S. and all over the world, but in the U.S. we've seen it very dramatically in the last handful of years just get better and better. Just so much improvement and so much more participation.
True. Very true. Let's remember, though, that the shoes are playing a serious effect at this moment. So things like this are part of both.
And it
You
was
have to
my
remember the
understanding, we talked about this
technology
before,
gains.
but like the more like younger runners would see a benefit because of inefficiency, and
'Cause
this
they're
helps
not
them with
as
their
efficient. Yeah. Yep.
efficiency. So
Yep.
yeah. Okay.
Yes. So we're going to notice things like that with high school runners even more than potentially like college and pro runners. So we have to keep that in mind. However, this is still incredible stuff they're doing. So Irene Riggs wins the race. Hannah Thompson comes in second and was gaining seriously. You got to watch this race. We've linked to the video if you want to watch it. So Thompson's coming in with 100 meters to go. It's like, wow, if she had another 50 meters, you could tell she wasn't going to catch her. She was too far back. But if she had another 50 meters, she would have caught her. This is just gaining so fast. Runs 9:55, which is a second faster than the previous meet record still. So 2 girls ran under the previous fastest ever in Arcadia. And she's only a sophomore.
Wow.
She's young. And she just ran like
But
one of the
remember,
fastest times in history.
I should say, like, that's a fast time for anyone. She should soak it in and enjoy it right now. And I'm not saying like She probably will.
Yeah, but
continue
sometimes
on
girls when they're
improvement.
younger run
Exactly.
fast. Yeah.
So
However,
when we say like
everyone
the
who's
younger,
run that time is older.
Okay.
So it's very uncommon for someone that young to run that fast. Though you're right, yes. It doesn't mean she'll run that fast again next year. Okay, so Emma Stutzman comes in third, runs a 30-second PR, 29-second PR to run 9:56, very nearly besting, or maybe she did just a slight bit best the previous median record, so that's crazy. And then Kiara O'Shea comes in eighth for a new Kentucky state record and runs under 10 minutes for the first time. So there's just incredible performances all around. Now, if the girls' race was fast, and it was, the boys' race is not something we can easily quantify. No.
Is it better?
So good.
Oh my goodness.
That it changes everything about the 3,200 meter record books.
Oh dear.
Everything just changed in one race. Think about it like this. First of all, there were, I don't know, six heats for the boys. There were a lot of boys here to run this race. All right, which is it's usually like 2 or 3 heats. And in the first 2 heats alone, 60 boys finished the race. 53 of them ran personal best times. So 53? That's as close to 100% of the participants running personal best as you can get in a race. Yes. Now, here's how you got to think about this. 9 minutes has always been this benchmark for high school boys in the 3,200. That's like you're in serious legit territory if you can run under 9 minutes.
Yeah,
over the years, it's more and more boys have been doing it, so it's not like unheard of anymore. But we're still talking about like upper echelon,
big scholarships.
Right? Well, in Arcadia, 23 boys did it in the first heat.
First heat?
19 more in the second heat, and 2 more in the third heat, for a total of 44 boys in one heat ran under 9 minutes. That's insanity.
It is
insanity. The degree of depth. I can't even begin to articulate this.
So they did. They just totally changed everything.
Changed everything. All right. So here's how it goes then. 7 boys ran new state records. Okay. And there weren't that many states represented. So like most of the states represented saw a new state record in this race. Most of them saw several boys under the previous state record. So we're not talking about just an outstanding guy here or there. Like we're talking about a whole slew of dudes resetting the leaderboard for their state in this one race. Okay, Simeon Birnbaum wins the race, and this guy, he's been winning all sorts of stuff. He won something in the New Balance Indoor Nationals, and he's just winning all sorts of stuff right now. He won in 8:34.10, a new national high school record, besting a 2008 record set by German Fernandez by exactly 0.13 seconds. So wait,
so he didn't crush it. He barely got it, but it's an old record.
Just
2008.
edged it. Yeah, and that's a serious record. We're talking. So German Fernandez did that in 2008. We're talking about the likes of Galen Rupp couldn't best that record. Wait, Galen Rupp, when was he in? Yeah, Galen Rupp couldn't best that record. We're talking about like
Grant Fisher.
Grant Fisher couldn't best that record. Cole Hawker, so like who's fast, right? And Simeon Birnbaum beats it. However, Daniel Simmons in second place also beat the previous national record.
That must have been close then.
He was only 0.04 of a second behind Birnbaum.
That's a race.
The finish in this race is awesome. 3 boys coming down the straight. Daniel Simmons has the lead, and he's just been gunning. For like the second half of the race, he was leading the whole thing, driving this crazy pace. And then he still has an extra gear with 300 to go, pulls away from everyone, and then last 100 meters, they're reeling him back in, and then Simeon Birnbaum suddenly, with like 20 meters to go, blam, just as like this light switch, and he just jolts ahead, passes Simmons right at the line. Wow. It was crazy. You got to watch that. Okay, so number 2 all time now, besting the previous record, now a new Utah state record, and Birnbaum set a new, where's he from? South Dakota state record. So there's a couple of them for you. And I should note that this race was paced. There was a rabbit, which you're not really supposed to do in high school races.
You still get a high school record if it's
yes.
rabbited? I didn't realize that. I thought
yes, you can, because the rabbit was another high schooler, and he was one who was entered in the event. Well, actually, he wasn't originally
They
entered in
never
the event,
did that when I was a kid.
No, and they never do it now either. This was just an anomaly.
Huh.
It's kind of weird, actually. A lot of people were like, what's happening here? Apparently, Aaron Salmon, who's the Nike Cross Nationals champion, or Foot Locker champion. Which one did he win? I think he won Foot Locker. Anyway, Aaron Salmon of Newbury Park decides he's going to pace the race. He ran a different event
He was probably
earlier.
asked to pace the race.
It's possible that he actually just volunteered it. But either way, so he's pacing the race, and that was kind of weird. Drops out at a mile, and for the whole second half, Daniel Simmons is leading the thing, does all the work, nearly wins it in a national record time, except Simeon Birnbaum stole it from him. Well, anyway, that was cool. Rocky Hansen, third place. He's only a few tenths further back than those guys.
How fun.
Runs the number 4 all-time time, and sets a new North Carolina state record. So I mentioned all three of those guys were about half a second apart. Connor Burns is in fourth place. He runs a new Missouri state record. He was about 7 seconds behind those guys. So they put some heat on him in the last lap. First four, those first four I just mentioned, are all in the top 15 all time. Okay, so this is how deep we're getting. If you add the fifth guy, top 20 all time. So the top 5 guys in this race reset the top 20 leaderboard in the nation. It's crazy. Patrick Kuhn set a new Florida state record. Weston Brown set a new Montana state record. And Pierre Atiogbe set a new Washington, D.C. record, which I didn't know that Washington, D.C. had its own records, but it does.
District of Columbia.
Yeah, I mean, I know what D.C. is, but yes. So there you have it. What amounts to now the most impressive single 3,200 meter event in history just changed everything about that distance for high school boys and girls in the United States.
Wow.
And everyone's just kind of sitting there with their jaws slack, like, what just happened?
Wow. That
More
is
to
really
come,
exciting.
I think.
Mm-hmm. I think so too, especially because there's so many of them. There's some that are going to obviously emerge from that. You know, we can't say all of them are going to end up continuing on in this sport, but these are names we could hear for decades. So that's exciting. Very exciting.
Could indeed.
Speaking of exciting, we're excited that you've decided to join us today, and we thank you for that.
And we're excited that we don't have to keep talking to you anymore.
What?
We can be done.
Well,
and
we're not done.
Can be done listening to us for today.
For today, because we will be back here next week, because we love doing this podcast. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please subscribe. Consider subscribing. We consider it an honor to be able to be one of the podcasts you listen to. So thank you.
That's basically it.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.